One second. Hi, could you just please buzz apartment 4A? Yeah, I know where you are. It's not 5, it's 4, and it's on the corner. It's right where that supermarket is in the corner. It's like a black gate. Mm-hmm. Grated black gate. Looks like a prison entrance. Yes. Yes. It's on the corner where the supermarket is. On the corner. There is a black gate. Okay. Yep. Okay. Bye. So someone's just gonna ring my doorbell right now because I ordered a watermelon. I don't know if you know this, but watermelons are one of my favorite things on the planet. Hi, Praxis. Hi, Jessica. Oh my gosh. One sec. Let me just go. Let me just go open the door. Sorry, had to ask Vasil to let the guy in when he comes. Hi, Dave. Hi, Danon. Hi, Norm. Hi, James. Hi, everyone. Sorry, had to make sure my watermelon gets into the building securely. I totally forgot I ordered it. Hi, Bumpy. Hi, Luann. Sorry, that was like the most random beginning to a live where I was like, "Hi, so let me describe how to find me," and then completely ran away. I'm sorry. How do I am, Slava? No, I'm not ordering pizza. I'm ordering a watermelon. Cinemelon, yeah, pretty much. Watermelon is important. We get it. Hi, Elliot. Hi, Walasi. Well, at least you know this happened right in the beginning of the live, so I can like safely cut that part out when it's saved, and we can just go back to saying hellos. You know. Hi, Peter. Hi, guys. So basically, today the title of the live is "What Happens If the Russian Empire Falls." Right. This is kind of what I want to talk about today, but also during the day there had been an incredible amount of news. Василь, чуєш? Я його чую вже просто. Він там. An incredible amount of news that came out. Oh, thank you, Steve. An incredible amount of news that came out of Ukraine. One of them being Tyra, the famed Ukrainian medic, testifying in front of the Helsinki Commission in Washington, D.C., about the war crimes committed by Russians while she was a prisoner of war in a Russian facility. I don't even know how to properly call it because it's not a prison facility. It's like a torture chamber, concentration camp facility, pretty much. But she was there for a couple of months and then she was liberated. So I do want to talk a little bit about her first as well. And I do want to talk a little bit about what she said and about the body cam footage that she smuggled out of Mariupol, because she was a combat medic in Mariupol and she has been a combat medic since the beginning of the Russian invasion onto Ukraine. She is very famed in Ukraine. Let me respond to this troll, please. How could you afford watermelon? Because unlike you, I had a real job, which you never obviously have because you're paid in rubles to annoy me. Particularly me for some reason. Like, gosh, like that's an obsession of an incredible magnitude. But I had a job and I have savings. Can you imagine? I don't drink them off on vodka. If you don't know how a person can afford $5.99 for a watermelon, that I feel really sad for you. Anyways, let's move on. So, so basically, I want to talk about the body cam footage as well and show some of it to you. It's grueling. It's grueling because she she was a combat medic. She was a very famed medic in Ukraine. She was serving as a medic on the front line since the beginning of the invasion, of the Russian invasion. She was training field medics, and she was an essential part to a lot of people surviving in Mariupol, and she is an essential part to the Ukrainian military and to the safety of Ukrainian military. Hi, Todd. Hi, Robert. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Grumpy. Hi, Mary Winkle. Hi, Gap. So basically, she was exchanged as a prisoner of war back onto Ukrainian territory. And I will talk a little bit about it in a minute. And I also want to talk about all of the findings that came out from Izium today about all of the graves, about all of the mass graves that have been excavated today, that have been researched today. Basically, everything that has been happening during the day. This live was supposed to be very simple. It was supposed to be just about basically predictions and thoughts of what would happen if Russia were to fall apart. But there's too much that happened today to not address it. And it was happening very rapidly, and there was a lot of information coming out, and I didn't feel right talking about it during my day's life, because there was just simply, oh, thank you, Carrie. There was just simply too much information going on, and I didn't feel comfortable basically just talking without having read everything that had happened. So we'll start with Tyra. Tyra is a Ukrainian medic. She made all of the headlines because she had been documenting the war, and she had recorded a tremendous amount of footage on her body cam as a medic. And when she was leaving the city of Mariupol, basically at that point fleeing Mariupol, she had smuggled a 256 gigabyte of footage in a memory card that she had stuffed into her tampon. And that's the only reason she was able to basically smuggle that footage out and give it to a journalist when she was captured. And that's how 3 months ago, a lot of us, thank you, Todd, a lot of us had found out about everything that has been happening in Mariupol. On that body cam footage, there was also footage of her helping a Ukrainian soldier and also helping a Russian soldier as well. And she addresses all of her patients as sunshine, and she was basically talking to both of them with the equal amount of respect and equal amount of worry for their lives and for their health. And that was one of the talking points of the Ukrainian government when they basically were asking Russians to exchange her back. First of all, under Geneva Conventions, medics are protected under all circumstances. She was not granted that protection, obviously. Russians in captivity had said that she was a member of the Azov battalion and she was a Yahtzee. Meanwhile, she was not a member. Of course, everybody is a member of the Azov battalion in Russian captivity. Everybody is a Yahtzee and everybody is a crazy Ukrainian person when it comes to Russians trying to portray it that way. But yes, she was portrayed as a Yahtzee, as a member of Azov battalion, as a lot of different things. She was not. She was a medic. She saved lives for everybody who needed it, who she was able to save lives for, and she was kept in Russian captivity. Now, she had testified today in front of the Helsinki Commission. There were a couple of interviews that she did, and the only things that were released are some of her testimony that won't hurt the people who were not exchanged yet. So, for example, my interview with the Azov defender had to be checked. My interview questions had to be checked by the basically OPSEC and their upper command, because some of the questions or some of the answers might hurt the prisoners of war that are still in captivity. So they need to make sure that what we ask and what the person can respond will not cause any further damage. Спасибо. Большое спасибо. Або дуже дякую. Thank you, Netlin. И живи Беларусь. So basically, sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. There was a Belarusian person saying that they're very happy about our counteroffensive, so I just wanted to respond to them. But yeah, so basically, she was only able to answer some questions to the press, and her testimony from the Helsinki Commission was only shared with certain quotes that they know are not going to be counterproductive for the people who are still in Russian captivity. So I'm going to read you some of her testimony. After that, actually, you know what? I'm going to read it from my phone because I already have it. I already have the article ready and set for this, and then I'm going to play you some YouTube videos. But here's the thing. This basically will explain. It's the article from the Washington Post. It'll basically explain everything that had happened. Thank you, Cheryl. A volunteer Ukrainian medic held captive 3 months by Russian forces in Ukraine's besieged port city of Mariupol told U.S. lawmakers Thursday of cradling and comforting fellow prisoners as they died of torture and inadequately treated wounds. Ukrainian Yulia Payevska, who was captured by pro-Russian forces in Mariupol in March and held at shifting locations in Russian allied territory in Ukraine's Donetsk region, spoke to lawmakers with the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, better known as the Helsinki Commission, a government agency created in part to promote international compliance with human rights. Her accounts Thursday were most detailed publicly of her treatment in captivity in what Ukrainians and international rights groups say are widespread detentions of both Ukrainian non-combatants and fighters by Russia's forces. Known to Ukrainians by the nickname Tyra, Payevska and her care of Mariupol's wounded during the nearly 7 months Russian invasion of Ukraine received global attention after her body cam footage was provided to the Associated Press. Do you know why we do this to you? A Russian asked Payevska as he tortured her, as she recounted to the commission. She told the panel her answer to him was, because you can. Searing descriptions of the suffering of detainees poured out. A 7-year-old boy died in her lap because she had none of the medical gear she needed to treat him, she said. Torture sessions usually launched with her captors forcing the Ukrainian prisoners to remove their clothes before the Russians set to bloodying and tormenting the detainees, she said. The result was some prisoners in cells screaming for weeks and then dying from torture and without any medical help. She said, then in this torment of hell, the only thing they feel before death is abuse and beating. She continued, recounting the toll among the imprisoned Ukrainians. My friend whose eyes I closed before his body cooled down. Another friend, and another, and another. Payevska said she was taken into custody after being stopped in a routine document check. She had been one of the thousands of Ukrainians believed to have been taken prisoner by Russian forces. Mariupol's mayor said that 10,000 people from his city alone disappeared during what was the month-long Russian siege of that city. It fell to Russians in April, with the city all but destroyed by Russian bombardment and with countless dead. The Geneva Convention singled out medics, both military and civilian, for protection in all circumstances. It is critical that the world hear the stories of those who endured the worst under captivity. Evidence is essential to prosecution of war crimes. Before she was captured, Payevska had recorded more than 256 gigabytes of harrowing body cam footage, showing her team's efforts to save the wounded in the cut-off city. She got the footage to Associated Press journalists, the last international team in Mariupol, on a tiny data card. The journalists fled the city on March 15th with the card embedded inside a tampon, carrying it through 15 Russian checkpoints. The next day, Payevska was taken by pro-Russian forces. Lawmakers played the AP's video of her footage Thursday. She emerged on June 17th, thin and haggard, her athlete's body more than 10 kilograms or 22 pounds lighter from lack of nourishment and activity. She said the AP report that showed her caring for Russian and Ukrainian soldiers alike, along with civilians of Mariupol, was critical to her release in a prisoner exchange. Payevska previously had declined to speak in detail to journalists about conditions in detention, only describing it broadly as hell. She swallowed heavily at times Thursday while testifying. Ukraine's government says it has documented nearly 34,000 Russian war crimes since the war began in February. The International Criminal Court and 14 European member nations also have launched investigations. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine says it has documented that prisoners of war in Russian custody have suffered torture and ill treatment, as well as insufficient food, water, healthcare, and sanitation. Russia has not responded to the allegations. Both the United Nations and the International Red Cross say they have been denied access to prisoners. Payevska, who said she suffered headaches during her detention as a result of a concussion from an earlier explosion, told lawmakers she asked her captors to let her call her husband to let him know what had happened to her. They said, "You have seen too many American movies. There will be no phone calls," she recounted. Her tormentors during her detention would sometimes urge her to unalive herself. "I said no, I will see what happens tomorrow." And that was her response every day to them telling her that she should just kill herself at this point. Hi, and that is her harrowing testimonial of what had been happening in Mariupol. I'm going to now, on YouTube, look up videos from her body cam, and I'm going to show it to you on TikTok through the live here, or if you guys don't follow me on YouTube, I highly suggest that you switch to YouTube because the quality of basically screen sharing is going to be much better. And my gosh, there's that one troll whose entire life is dedicated to just stalking me. And I wonder, like, does he have nothing better to do with his life? Because, like, the thing is, okay, I get it. He thinks that he got to me because I, like, respond to him and single him out. But my whole point is, like, my man, I don't care for you or for what you say. Nothing that you say is going to make me feel any worse about myself, because I know that he's probably created his 40-second account today to come in here and say something else. But like, the thing is, I don't care. Yeah, he does get whacked at record speed, but the point is, like, he's trying to make me feel bad for myself. And it's like, dude, the last thing that will make me feel bad about myself is a troll. Like, I particularly don't care what you have to say to me and what you think. Okay, so this is going to be 4 minutes and 30 seconds of compiled body cam footage from her body cam, and I'm going to share my screen to show it to you on YouTube. And I'm going to take you guys on TikTok and also show it here, but.
For 2 weeks, Ukrainian medic Yulia Paevska, better known as Tyra, witnessed the daily horrors of war. She recorded 256 gigabytes of video to show the world what was happening in Mariupol as the Russian invasion unfolded.
Это Tyra, Юлия Паевская. На флешке, которую вам передали, информация по раненым за все время до сегодняшнего момента.
Tyra asked the Associated Press to get her footage safely out of the besieged city. On March 16th, days after recording the selfie, Tyra and her colleague disappeared.
2 недели войны. Блокадный Маріуполь.
Свій такий підрозділ Ангели Тайри, який вже зараз знають у всій Україні. рятувала на полі бою і наших поранених.
Tyra found her calling as a medic after the Russian invasion of Crimea in 2014. As a member of the Ukrainian team for the Invictus Games, she was going to be featured in a documentary on inspirational figures. But when the first rockets landed, she quickly jumped into action and turned on her camera. Paramedic Sergei Chernobrivets worked closely with her.
Хоть трошки вам помогла.
Спасибо. Вы как тут держитесь?
Та нормально ми, що ми.
Она вот, как сказать, как настоящий медик, который аполитичен, и он оказывает помощь всем, кто этого нуждается, в этом нуждается.
It wasn't just soldiers. Hours of footage showed Tyra treating wounded children, including a brother and sister in the early days of the war.
Где болит солнышко? Ножки? Руку. Направление. Тихо. Ручка болит.
Despite all the efforts to save him, the damage is too much for the young boy and the battle-hardened medic. She returns to close the eyes of the boy whose parents were also killed.
Мальчик ушел. Мальчик умер. Девочку еще включаю. Может быть, выживет девочка.
Tyra also treated Russian soldiers, despite reservations from her countrymen.
А ну, укривайте його, бо його тіліпає. Давай я сама буду.
Что ты пришел на нашу землю убивать нас?
Что мы тебе плохого сделали, солнце? Ладно, командир.
In one of her last body cam recordings, Tyra again is tending to Russian soldiers. She explains why.
Завози.
Ничего не болит. Он сам ходит? Да, куда его? Куда? Вставай себе. Вставай, на, пожалуйста. Вставай, вставай, на, пожалуйста, ты пидоров людей убиваешь. Детей, на, братик, сюда, пошли.
Спокойно. Они не будут к нам такими добрыми.
Конечно, нет. Русских лечить будут?
Ну что, я не могу с ними ничего сделать. Они военнопленные.
On March 21st, a Russian TV network announced Tyra's capture, saying she was part of a far-right militia and had tried to flee the city. No one has seen or heard from her since.
Сейчас. На фонаре.
The Ukrainian government credits Tyra with saving hundreds of lives during her career.
Раз, два, три, оп!
Her family and friends say the video shows a woman dedicated to healing, not war.
Sorry. Thanks, trolls. You're spreading this channel. Oh, are there trolls? But yeah, basically, she is. Well, they did find her. That's the whole thing. I was just talking about her. She is a combat medic that has been exchanged, and she has been giving her recount of everything that had happened to her in while in Russian captivity. She one of the reasons why she was able to be exchanged, unlike a lot of other prisoners of war, is because she was saving all lives, and there was quite literally recordings from her body cam asking Ukrainian soldiers to not be so rough, asking Ukrainian soldiers to, you know, like sometimes when there were Russian prisoners of war, the commanders would be like taking their testimonies and stuff, and she'd be like, hey, you know, this person is weak, like, let's do this tomorrow or something like that. And they were beating her in captivity. They were calling her a member of far-right militia. They were torturing her. They were doing all sorts of atrocities to her. And she is just a medic who had saved a lot of lives, including lives of Russian soldiers that quite frankly didn't deserve it at all. Because those were the soldiers in Mariupol are the last people who deserved their lives to be saved, because they bombarded the city and leveled it with the ground. There's so many deaths on their hands. So many deaths. But, you know, she is a doctor. She is a medic. And her primary goal is to help everyone who is in need. And so her testimony today aired in front of the Helsinki Commission. And well, rather, she testified today in front of the Helsinki Commission, and we had a little glimpse into what she had to say. Okay. So here is someone on Twitch is saying, Russia itself is just a giant empire. Europe gobbled up colonies overseas. Russia took over and incorporated neighboring lands. Under Peter the Great, Russia expanded by an average of 50 square miles for each day of his rule. He ruled for 43 years. Well, we're going to get to that today, actually, once we finish talking about once we finish talking about the excavation of graves in Izium, we're going to move on to the Russian Empire, and I'm going to explain a little bit of when I think the Russian Empire truly collapsed and whether it did. And we're going to talk about Peter the Great. And we are going to talk about USSR a little bit, and we're also going to talk about what is going to happen if the Russian Empire truly falls, because it never did. It genuinely, truly never did. So, okay, let me see if I can find this one video. Please. Yes, okay. Here. This is the two Associated Press video. Okay, so
at Urivo, we've simplified the home buying process, saving our clients time.
Why do they
and
like
money.
playing these stupid ads? I absolutely despise it, but okay. So I'm going to play something again on. I don't mean the Soviet Union when I say the Russian Empire pineapple. I mean that the Russian Empire never collapsed. The Russian Empire turned into Soviet Union and lost some territory and basically rebranded. And then Soviet Union rebranded into the Russian Federation. But all of that is still the Russian Empire. And the Russian Empire, in my view, has never truly ever collapsed. Anyway, so I'm going to add this video from Associated Press about what had been happening in Izium. And okay, first of all, let me tell you what has happened in the Izium. What has happened in the Izium? Hi, Todd. Grumpy, I don't think he's being disrespectful. I think he is asking genuinely. Anyways, so today, in one of the towns that were liberated by the Ukrainian army from the Russian occupation, Izium, they have found an incredible amount of mass graves. By an incredible amount of mass graves, I mean more than 455 bodies. 18 of them were Ukrainian defenders identified, and the rest, it looks like, were civilians. So, according to Volodymyr Zelensky, what they have seen in Izium is times and times worse than what had happened in Bucha. And Bucha is an event that shocked the entire world. Now, today they were excavating those graves and they have found some truly, truly disturbing stuff in them. Civilians with their hands tied behind their back, executed. Ukrainian defenders with their hands tied behind their back, executed. Just bodies on top of bodies on top of bodies. And I want to show you this video from Associated Press so you could see for yourself specifically what had happened there. Another video that really, really touched me today was the video of a dog that was found in Kharkiv region after liberation, and it's just a happy dog. She's very happy to see people. That was really happy to see people, but but the dog had a Z carved into her nose. And basically, essentially, yeah, the Russians mutilated the dog and carved a Z into their nose. Now, Pineapple is asking if I'm a professor. I'm not a professor. However, I am endorsed with my knowledge of history by a pretty credible, but by a very credible Ukrainian professor. And you can, if you find me on YouTube, which is the same thing, which is under the same name as Twitch, you can find 2 videos that we have done so far as a live. One is titled "In the Words of a Ukrainian Crimea," in the words of the Ukrainian of a Ukrainian historian, and the next one is titled "Donbas," in the words of a Ukrainian historian, where I discuss and translate a Ukrainian historian's recount of everything that happened in Donbas from its known history to today, and whose was Crimea, who were the native people of Crimea, what had happened in Crimea. I have a degree in history. Well, I have a minor in history. I have studied history since a very, very long time ago, since I can barely remember myself, to be honest. History is one of my biggest hobbies. I'm incredibly well versed in geopolitics and politics of Eastern Europe. And if you want to test my knowledge on history and on whether you want to listen to me, you're welcome to watch the videos on my YouTube. And you're welcome to watch the shorts that I do on my TikTok. And you're welcome to find out from there. I am professionally a UX UI designer with a degree in psychology, graphic design, and history. History being a minor. However, I do know it much better than your average person, or much better than someone who knows it better than an average person. But the decision whether to listen to me and take note of what I'm saying is entirely up to you. Okay, I am going to add this to the stream, and I'm going to play it to you on both TikTok and here. And here you go. So this will be from Associated Press. We're gonna have to listen to this awful ad, but it is what it is, and there's nothing that I can do with it.
Якщо пишете, то там, де наші побратими лежать, то може противник щось
положити якусь вибухову речовину, там, гранату, яку не можна підкинути.
Нам підстави розуміти, що у цих могилах є ще ВСУ. Я скажу так, що ми ще будемо знаходитися.
Це поховання ми знайшли, тому що російські солдати, фашисти виставили це відео.
Ми думаємо, по надписам, які були тут написано 17 кіл, але на відео їх більше. Ми ще нарахували, але я думаю, що біля 25-30. Можливо, це ще є не одне поховання на цьому кладовищі, ми це ще буде відпрацьовувати. І я думаю, що ми знайдемо всіх, хто загинув тут.
Chiru has no choice.
So this is a bit of, this is a bit of what happened. This is a bit of what happened in Izium, and this is a bit of the stuff that they found. This video is not really graphic, and I purposely didn't really want to show anything graphic because that could be a strike, you know, and because YouTube is very fair and so is TikTok. I feel honestly, recently I've discovered that the most tolerant platform to everything that I want to show is Twitch and Twitter, which is why I do repost a lot of my tweets and I do give a lot of commentary there because I feel like I can scream Russia is a terrorist state there from a rooftop and they don't particularly care and maybe they even agree with me. But this is nothing new. I do want to repeat myself from my earlier stream and say that, you know, while every single person in the West is gasping in awe from the findings of Izium and from what happened in Bucha and everything else, it's not necessarily anything new, surprising, or shocking to Ukrainians. Obviously, it's incredibly awful, and obviously, for us as a nation, it's devastating, right? But shocking it is not. This is something that we have been doing from the beginning. This is something that has been happening to us from the beginning of the Russian Empire. Right, so this is how I'm going to seg into talking about the Russian Empire and why I say that this is something that we have been enduring from the beginning of times. Thank you, Pineapple. The Russian Empire emerged in the 1700s from a little called the Tsardom of Moscow. The Russian Empire claims to have roots in Kievan Rus, which it does not, and we will get there. And the name is stolen from its rightful owner, from the rightful country that should have inherited all of the history and culture, and that is Ukraine. We did inherit the history, we did inherit the culture. It's just that, you know, nobody in the world knew about it. So the Tsardom of Moscow, my PhD in empathy. The Tsardom of Moscow was a country that originated from Ugro-Finnic settlements. And when Peter I, which is sometimes called in history as Peter the Great, but I refuse to call him that way because great he was not. He was Peter the Invader, Peter the Colonizer, Peter the imperialist greed, but great he was not. And all of the greatness about him is basically stealing Ukrainian history and colonizing a bunch of lands. But Peter the Great, or Peter the First, was reading into the history of Tsardom of Muscovy and realized that the Ugro-Finnic tribes that the Tsardom originated from had very sparse history, were very undeveloped at the time, and there was not really anything grand and grandiose to show to the world for his ambitions of like marrying into royalty of other countries to play out, for his ambitions to having trades and deals with other big empires, right? So that was impossible, and therefore he had to figure out how to make his tsardom be appealing for other empires around him. And here was Kievan Rus, who had connections to the Byzantine Empire, Kievan Rus, whose rulers were married to French royalty and Spanish royalty, Kievan Rus, that was one of the biggest centers of trade, Kievan Rus, which was the crossroads of civilization, Kievan Rus that was developing very, very incredibly fast. So Peter the First decided to take Rus, like an image change, pretty much like rebranding. He basically rebranded Tsardom of Muscovy into the Russian Empire. So there was Kievan Rus, and Russia. The name Russia originates from the name Rus, and that is how they try to justify that Kievan Rus was the original Russia, right? But here's the funny thing: it's not Rusi and Kiev. At that time in history, it was called Ukraina Rus or Kiev Rus. So by no means was it the Russian Rus. Very often, very, very often, they like to mention the city called the Grand Novgorod, Veliki Novgorod, as one of the cities that existed during the times of Kiev Rus, and there are two ties that Russians like to take in order to kind of tie them to Kiev Rus and justify that they are the rightful ancestors, right? One of such things is the city of Novgorod, because it existed at the same time. It was part of Kiev Rus, and it was, it's Russia. It's part of the Russian Empire. So here is the funny thing. Yes, it is true. Veliki Novgorod, or Novgorod at that point, did exist. It was a bunch of autonomous settlements that were not really connected by much infrastructure, and they had just tribes living there. It was not a legitimate city. You could not have called it a city because, again, it was basically a bunch of settlements that were connected by some roads, no infrastructure, and they were not. And they did not classify themselves as like one big city with inhabitants, right? Or one city with inhabitants of the same kind. Those tribes never wanted to join the Russian Empire. They never wanted to join the Tsardom of Muscovy. They never wanted to join anybody except they were swallowed by it, right? And after they were swallowed by it, they were basically appropriated by the Russian Empire. And that's how they tied it to, when people say, oh, Moscow didn't even exist, when Kiev did, because Kiev predates Moscow by about 1,000 years, Russians love to throw in Veliki Novgorod. But Veliki Novgorod existed, yeah, except at that point it wasn't part of the Russian Empire, nor did it want to. It just got swallowed by you, but that does not mean that you are rooted in it, right? The other talking point they like to use when they say that Kiev Rus Russia, originated in Kiev Rus and has ancestors, is that Yuri Dolgoruki, who was a son of one of the rulers of Kievan Rus, had created Moscow. Now, that's all good and all. However, Yuri Dolgoruki was one of the most hated of, I believe, 14 or 15 siblings. He was number 9 of those siblings. And he was one of the most hated of them by the inhabitants of Kiev Rus and his brothers, because he consistently tried to overthrow the throne, and he consistently tried to take the throne, even though obviously he was not in the direct line of accession to the throne, because he was 9th. He was the 9th child. And so that wasn't going to happen for him. So at some point, because of his greed and because of his desire to grasp territories, and because of his desire to consistently expand Rus, because of his desire to become a ruler, he was exiled from Kievan Rus, and he had settled in a little village at that point known as Moskov. Not Moscow, Moskov, as in Moskov. So in Russian, Moscow is Moskva. He settled in Moscow, and he wrote to his brother saying, "Hello, brother, you should visit me in Moscow." And that's how Russians are tying their ties to Kiev Rus, saying that Yuri Dolgoruki had founded Moscow. First of all, he did not. It already existed. It was a village. It had barely any infrastructure, and he was inviting his brothers to come visit him. They did not, clearly. Then at some point, he had made some dealings, and he overthrew the ruling of Kievan Rus, and he had become the new ruler. He was then poisoned about a month after and killed, obviously, and he was not buried near his family because of how much the inhabitants of Kievan Rus absolutely despised him. So they basically buried him outside of the bounds of it because they wouldn't let him, lay to rest there. And so that is the man that Russians are crediting with founding Moscow, and that is the man that Russians are crediting with their connection to Kiev Rus. I mean, obviously Russia picked the greatest one and the best one, Yuri Dolgoruki. Dolgoruki in Russian means long arms, and he had been given that name because of his need and desire to grab everything around him and territories and stuff like that. And so that says a lot about him. Now, back to Peter the First. Peter the First basically made these. Peter the First basically rewrote history of Moscovia and turned it into history of Russia. Took all of these settlements that were not well documented and tied Russian people, or rather Moscovian people, to having been related ethnically to certain settlements within Kiev Rus. Those that were not very well documented, because let me tell you, Kievan Rus history was incredibly documented at the time, but because it was not, it wasn't globalism, it wasn't digital, obviously. It was really hard to keep track of some very small settlements, and so that's kind of how he was able to get around it. And then after him came Yekaterina II. Yekaterina really liked the idea of turning Russian Empire into the ancestor of Kievan Rus. And she started researching their history more and more and more and more. And what she had found was that their history was very lacking, very bleak, not something that would put them onto the world arena as a mighty empire. And so she decided that Peter's decision to rebrand into Russia and Peter's decision to tie themselves to Kievan Rus was a great one, and she perpetuated that idea, continuously rewriting history, burning archives, hiring basically writers to write that history and to rebrand Moscovia into this incredible Russian Empire. Ekaterina II is known in Ukraine or rather known as in Russia as the founder of Odessa. She is also known as the founder of Mykolaiv. And those things are also not true, because she had quite literally signed a decree, which Russians say was a decree in creation of Odessa and Mykolaiv, but it was a decree on free entrance into Odessa and free entrance into Mykolaiv, and basically making them a part of Russian Empire. Yekaterina II had a lot of issues with Cossacks because they were a democratic state that had a council and was choosing their leaders and had elders, and they were a powerful army, and so she was annihilating them one by one and quite literally destroyed Sich. Sich was the Cossack center. She is known as the innovator of the Russian Empire. However, she's not an innovator. She's just a simple thief. She's just a simple thief who used colonialism and used her army in order to grab more territory. Now, why am I talking about it and why am I mentioning these two specific figures? It's because, you know, a lot of people, when they say, oh, it's Putin's war, oh, Putin did this, Putin did that, Putin did the other thing, Putin stole Ukrainian music, Putin, you know, did all of these crazy things. One of the reasons why I want to talk about Russian Empire in this light is because it is not Putin. It is not just Putin. It's Russian culture, and this culture originated back in the 1700s when Peter I decided to rewrite history and decided that the appropriate way of making yourself be a great empire is not through merit and is not through accomplishments, but through appropriating merits and accomplishments. Then he went ahead and conquered territories. He went ahead and appropriated other tribes. He went ahead and basically was just, you know, if I were to choose a name for him in history, I would call him Peter the Land Grab, because that's quite literally what he did. He kept expanding the Russian Empire for it to be big and grandiose and reminiscent of the empire. And Ekaterina II, she went in his footsteps. Now, when we talk about the fall of the Russian Empire, we very often talk about the Bolshevik Revolution, and we very often talk about the death of the family of Romanovs. Now, in my opinion, and the way I see it, the Russian Empire did not fall with the Bolsheviks, and the Russian Empire did not cease to exist with Romanovs. The only thing that changed in the Russian Empire when it became the Soviet Union is the ruler, because now instead of the blue bloods and instead of the family of rulers came the communists. It was still the same principles as the Russian Empire. It was still the same principles of changing history, the same principles of repressions, the same principles of a Tsar, Lenin, of a Tsar on the pedestal and a nation that bows to him. The only thing that changed was the name, really, and the fact that now the power wasn't passed on generationally in one family. The power was now passed on generationally within the communist family, right? So it's still not like they could have elections. It's still not like they could choose their own leaders. It was still the same people, and the people were installed by the previous people in power. And the methods in which Soviet Union existed were the same as the Russian Empire, and that was lies, appropriation, and theft, torture and repressions, no freedom of speech. You had to bow to the leader. You had to put your leader on the pedestal, and the leader could never do any wrong because they are the Tsar. And the Tsar at that point was Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Gorbachev. And so this is my reasoning to why I think when the Russian Empire collapsed, it did not. It got rebranded again, as it did when the Tsardom of Muscovy became the Russian Empire, as it did when the Russian Empire became the USSR. Now, within the USSR, Russia was the country that was superior. Russia was the country where all of the decisions were made. Russians were the people who were considered superior. Quite literally, in your passport, you had your nationality, and if you weren't Russian, all of your opportunities for education, for work, for all of this stuff were much less available than those opportunities were to Russians. And if you wanted to, and if you were smart, and if you were making accomplishments on your own, you had to move to Moscow or St. Petersburg, and you had to pretend to be Russian. This is how we have all these incredible Russian scientists. And then you look at their place of birth and their place of education, and it turns out they were born and raised in Ukraine, and they just worked in Moscow. But they had to say that they're Russian, and they had to attribute themselves to being Russian. So that is precisely how it was kept up, you know, through basically appropriation and ethnic cleansing. I lost my train of thought a little bit. I'm sorry, ADHD here, but the Soviet Union, which is the former Russian Empire, but hi, привет, the former Russian Empire that just basically ceased to exist with its name and now rebranded into Soviet Union, kept doing its business and kept going about their business. The only other thing that happened was they lost a little bit of territory, right? So their empire didn't collapse. It just lost some territories, gained some other ones, rebranded into the Soviet Union. Now, fast forward to when the Soviet Union collapsed under Gorbachev. A lot of people who talk about Gorbachev, which I've made a video about it, I've vented about it on live, one time too many, you know? But when the Soviet Union collapsed, right, under Gorbachev, it still didn't collapse. First of all, привет. First of all, it didn't necessarily collapse because there are still a ton of republics within Russia. Russia is called a federation, right? It's not a country. It's not a lone standing country. Russia was the beacon of the Soviet Union. Russia was the decision maker of the Soviet Union. Russia was superior in Soviet Union. So it still was Russia, and everything was done according to what Russia and Russians wanted, right? So then when the Soviet Union became the Russian Federation, there are still nationalities living within Russia, which, mind you, if you put them all together, they are the majority of Russian population, but they're called minorities because, you know, their combined population is the largest. It's larger than that of the ethnic Russians, the people with blonde and blue eyes that we're so used to attributing as Russian, right? I think up until this invasion, a lot of people in the West didn't even know that there are so many different, it's about 130 different nationalities within the Russian Federation. And all of them are oppressed. All of their resources are being drained. Those regions are actually the regions most rich in natural resources. Most of Russia is like a mud forest of unpopulated territories. And most of its resources are in 160 nationalities. Yes, so upwards of Chechens, there is a lot. There is Tatarstan, there is Chechnya, there is Kalmykia, there is Buryatia, there is Kabardino-Balkar Republic, there are so many, Yakutia, there are so many different nationalities. All of those nationalities are being thrown as cannon fodder into war, and that is another genocide, the more hidden one than the genocide of Ukrainians at the moment, that Russia is committing onto its own minorities. And Cindy, stop snoring, baby. And and these nationalities live in Russia, right? They have their own languages, they have their own culture, they have their own traditions, they have their own values, they have their own history. Yet, their history is not allowed to be proudly displayed. Their language is not allowed to, well, rather not even promoted to be learned in schools. The funding is not there, so they actually have no ability to teach their language in schools. They just teach Russian. Their culture is not promoted. In fact, it's frowned upon. Their religions are also frowned upon, and still to this day, unless you're an ethnic blonde, blue-eyed, or white Russian, right, you are looked down upon. And Russia still to this day colonizes these nationalities, makes them speak Russian, makes them attribute themselves to Russian culture, does not promote self-expression, and in fact, quite literally rejects it, and forbids it, and prosecutes for it. I saw a video the other day, which is 2022, of a man being arrested on some sort of a small crime, and he was appearing in court in front of the judge in his republic, which is the autonomous republic within Russia, right? And he was speaking to the judge in his native language, and the judge kept saying, "We are in Russia, you have to speak Russian." He's like, "I'm in the court of this republic. The reason I'm in the court of this republic, and I'm speaking the official language of this republic." And she had said that his court date is postponed because they need to hire him a translator if he refuses to speak Russian. That is colonization. And the fact that there are so many nationalities living within Russia with their own history, their own traditions, their own culture, and their own everything, yet they are not being equally attended to as much as the ethnic Russians, is proving that it is an empire. And it is an empire. Like, what are the characteristics of an empire? Characteristics of an empire is basically a kingdom that consists of other nations and swallows them, right? And swallows them and drains them of resources and puts all of the main resources into the ruling class and into the ruling bunch, right? And that is specifically what Russia is still doing. So when the Soviet Union was collapsing with Gorbachev, first of all, it would have collapsed under anyone. Second of all, a lot of people say that Gorbachev dissolved the Soviet Union for democratic Russia, to give democracy to all of these territories, to give democracy to all of these countries, so people could get what they wanted. Oh my gosh, thank you, Natlin. Oh, I've never seen that before. That's so cute. Thank you so much. That Russia basically, that these countries should have their democracy. They should be able to govern themselves. Hi, E. Johnson. One sec. Let me finish this, and I will respond to your question. And nice to meet you. So that's what mass media in the West wanted you to believe. Realistically, the Soviet Union was broke. The Soviet army was broke and garbage at that point. And Gorbachev could not hold on to the Soviet Union. A lot of people like to say that at least he did not send tanks through the cities through peaceful protests. He did, not in 1991, but in 1987, 1989, 1990, 1988, he did protests against the Soviet Union. He did try to keep the Soviet Union. He just didn't do it in 1991, when the entirety of the Soviet countries and Soviet republics rebelled against him. And when the entirety of these republics wanted out, he just didn't have an opportunity to. He was broke. The Soviet Union was broke. Another myth is that he united Germany. He did not unite Germany. He could not afford to hold on to Berlin. Had he been able to, he would have. He absolutely did not want these countries to become democratic. He absolutely did not want the Soviet Union to dissolve. He just had no choice. There are numerous videos. I posted one of them on TikTok from his speeches where he's saying that, where he's talking to the republics who want to separate, and he is telling them, you're not going to go anywhere. You have no choice. You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to be able to. That is not a man who wants democracy. The policy of glasnost, or the policy of speaking out, and the policy of perestroika, which is a restructuring, was not done because he wanted democracy. It was done because people wanted democracy and they were rebelling, and it was his, basically he was holding on to straws, and he was holding on, trying to hold on to the Soviet Union by giving people a little bit of what they want, right, to satisfy their needs. But unfortunately, or fortunately, it wasn't enough. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, the reason why I'm saying that that is still Russian Empire, and the reason why I'm saying that Russia right now is still an empire, is because, as I said previously, Soviet Union was not Soviet Union, right? It was Russian Empire rebranded into a different name and into a different Tsar. When Soviet Union collapsed and Russian Federation appeared, the Soviet Union didn't collapse. It lost territories because all of these little republics that existed within Russia that should have been independent, all of these nationalities, that lived there should have been independent. They should have been given autonomy. They should have been given autonomy for their culture, language, traditions, for development, but they were not. Instead, they became the Russian Federation. The reason it's called a federation is because there are multiple autonomous republics existing in it. However, these republics are anything but autonomous. They do not have any autonomous decision making. None of the heads of the state have any autonomous powers of decision making. They don't decide anything for themselves. Russia does. They can't use their own resources. Russia does. And by Russia, I mean for the ethnic Russian regions. For the regions that are mostly populated by ethnic Russians. If you were to really, really look at what would be left of Russia, if it was Russia, a country, not Russia, an empire, it would most likely just start with Moscow and end with St. Petersburg, because those are the only lands and the only populations that are predominantly consistent of the people who are actually Russian, or rather Moscovian. And that brings me to the point of what would happen if Russian Empire finally fell. Because what we're witnessing right now is the weakening of an empire, of that original Russian Empire that we were told collapsed in 1918 or 1917. It did not. It did not. It rebranded, and then it rebranded again. And I really hope that this time, when it does collapse, because the collapse of it is inevitable, it's just a matter of when. I really hope that it doesn't just rebrand into another smaller empire, but it will actually truly collapse. Now, none of us truly know what will happen really in terms of like which areas are going to separate, what is going to be the territory of Russia, unless they also change the name to something else, just sort of to, to avoid the being pariahs and try to kind of rebrand again. But see, here is the thing. The problem of Russia and Russians and their thinking is that they never truly changed. They just rebranded. As in, like, let's say you have a hole in the wall, and instead of patching it, you just put a poster over it. That's kind of how I see why Russian culture and Russian way of thinking is not any different than it was during the imperial times of like Peter I and Ekaterina II, right? Because they never really changed. They never really changed into the Soviet Union. They never really changed into Russian Federation, right? Or into like a different country with different values. It was always the same values in the same country. And the only value was to drain other countries of its resources and to make Russia, the ethnic Russia and the regions of Moscow and St. Petersburg stronger, because really they don't invest their money into anything but those two regions. Russia doesn't really have infrastructure anywhere. It's a country biggest exporter of gas, as we know, yet only 30% of households are connected to the gas networks. Now, what I think would happen if Russian Empire fell, right? If Russia ceased to exist, I think that what might likely happen, maybe not immediately, but in the long run, is all of these republics, all of these underserved, underprivileged, undermined republics are going to try and separate either into countries of combined republics, or into federations of combined republics, or into their own separate small countries or smaller countries. Because if you look at the map, Russia is pretty damn big. Another thing is that half of Russia is really like not inhabited or not inhabitable. It's like taiga, which is literally a mud forest, and Siberia. The majority of the population of Russia lives in Western Russia. The eastern parts of Russia are very sparsely populated. And then there is also Kamchatka, which is even more sparsely populated, and that's near Korea and Japan. Kamchatka, Sakhalin. those areas are they barely have population there, right? So those, I don't necessarily know what happened to those, because those would most likely just try and join other countries that are neighboring, because there is not enough population, nor there is enough infrastructure, nor are there enough resources to kind of sustain themselves. So in my thinking, if Russia were to collapse, if Russian Federation were to collapse, it would be a mix of newly emerging nations and also nations joining their neighboring countries that are already more established. I think that Russia, as we know it, would probably just be left with Moscow and St. Petersburg region, and it would probably be a quite tiny country unless they were to convince some of the republics and some of the minorities to stay in and form another like federation/union. Now, that is going to be a very hard economic blow, and that is also going to be a very hard transition on the world. But one of the very positive things out of it, if not abused, is that most of the resources that Russia has, that Russia blackmails the world with, and that Russia abuses, are not within the bounds of the, of the ethnic white Russian inhabited places. They're in Caucasus Mountains, which those are the republics, and those are the republics that would most definitely want to be independent, as they are some of the poorest republics. And they are some of the least structured and least taken care of republics, even though they bring Russia, or rather, even though they bring the most money to Moscow, right? So I think that there would be a lot of these republics forming alliances with different countries, and gas and oil would not be as monopolized as it is right now, because it would now not be in a chokehold by this massive country, but it would now be belonging to a bunch of smaller other countries, and we could make deals with different ones to import gas from there and oil as well. In terms of the Russian people, honestly, I don't know what's going to happen to Russian people if Russia collapses, because one of the things is, it's truly not just Putin, it's the people and Putin, because the people's mindset throughout all of these years has been that they are superior, that they are the most superior nation. And they were really, in Russia, they were, because in Russia, ethnic Russians are treated the best. They're put on pedestal. They look down on all of the other nationalities, and those nationalities, albeit Russian, they're Russian to them. And I don't know how the adjustment would be like for the Russian people to live in a country of solely Russian people, right? Not like Russia and other like Russian minorities that you could look down upon, and Russian minorities that could be underserved and you could be put on a pedestal. But how would they feel, and how would they manage living in a place where there is no one else to be superior over? It's going to be incredibly beneficial for these minorities, as they're not going to have these ethnic Russians looking down on them. British oppressors to the end. So E. Johnson, yeah, so that's kind of like the thing, yes, oppressors in terms of like, imposing their culture, taking advantage of minorities, taking advantage of natives of those lands, right? And doing that for generations, to the point where these minorities don't even feel ownership over their land, don't even feel like they deserve to be, their own country, their own culture, and they deserve to have the right to speak their language. They deserve to have the right to to have their own traditions. They deserve to have the right to have their own holidays, and they deserve them to be recognized, right? Because they're so deeply ingrained that they are just Russians. And not only Russians, they are the second sort kind of Russians, right? They weren't lucky enough to be born like Russian, right? And I think that for these minorities, this change is going to be incredibly amazing, because they're going to be able to prosper, they're going to be able to flourish, they're going to be able to decide for themselves what their immediate needs and what their priorities are, and what they want to invest money in, and what kind of languages do they want to learn, and what kind of culture they want to promote. But it's also going to be difficult because they've never had sorry, Netland, they've never had an opportunity to do that for themselves. So it's also going to be a very chaotic period of all of these nationalities figuring out what they are and who they are, right, on their own. Now, as to Russians, I think it's also going to serve them a really good lesson, because for the first time in history, instead of reigning over somebody, they're going to be living in a small country that isn't an empire, without all of this, without all of this nostalgia for former greatness, and without all of this stuff. But they're actually going to have to build their own history, their new history. They're going to have to establish themselves in the world. They're going to have to give the world a reason to want to do business with them. They're going to have to give the world a reason to want to include them into the world arena. They're going to have to give the world a reason to trust them, right? And that is going to be a first in their history, where they genuinely will have to prove themselves, instead of stealing somebody else's credentials and winging it and getting in based on false pretenses, right? They're going to have to earn their spots in society. And that is something that Russia hasn't had to do pretty much ever since it was, well, it never did, to be fair. Genuinely, yeah, it never ever had to do that, because when the chance was there and when they had to do it, they just rewrote history. And they just appropriated it from Kiev and Rus, and that's how they winged it. And that's how they got in, and that's how they remained in their spotlight. So I think that that's going to be an incredibly interesting thing to observe, because it's also going to be grounding. It's going to be humbling. It's going to be something that they've never had to experience. And it's going to be an interesting watch. I don't know even if they would keep the name Russia. I feel like the liberal Russians who are going to want to prove themselves as something so much better, they're going to want to separate from that history, right? They're going to want to create something new. And that will be incredibly interesting to observe. And also how they would be governing this country without having a knowledge of how to coexist with people. They only know how to exist over people. So yeah, that is my idea of what, Russia is an empire run by an ethno-state. Yep. I can't translate kind of topic, but what's the meaning of the red and black Ukrainian flags? I've been seeing them pop up on the web. Okay, so the red and black Ukrainian flag is the flag of the Ukrainian Insurgents Army and the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Russia will tell you that it's the Ukrainian Yahtzee flag. It is not. It was used by the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and by the Ukrainian Insurgents Army. Basically by Ukrainian Insurgents Army, and the reason why it is red and black is because when you spill blood onto the blue and yellow into the blue and onto the blue and yellow flag. It looks like it's red and black because yellow is not bright enough to contrast the red, so red completely takes over, and blue is a dark color, so it just looks like black. And so the reason why they took the red and black flag is because when they were fighting for Ukrainian independence, it is to honor all of the Ukrainian blood spilled for the Ukrainian independence. So that's the meaning of the flag, and the flag was adopted by the Ukrainian insurgents army who was fighting for Ukrainian independence against Poles, Russians, and Nazi Germany. So that is what the flag is. No. So here's the thing. So basically what you're saying is evidenced. Let me see. I'm going to read some of the comments because I missed some. But here's one of the comments that's very important, and it's what you're saying is evidenced by many people who changed their names. For example, Sergei Lavrov's real family name is Kalataryan, which would make him Armenian. But his Russophile father changed his name to Lavrov. Yeah, of course, because if you had a Russian last name, not an Armenian one, you automatically had more doors open for you, right? Because with an Armenian last name, it's prejudice. Nobody would really do business with you. You would have less opportunity. So it was done for the better. I don't know if this is relevant, but was Lenin and his Bolsheviks Moscovians? Is that where this whole ethnocentric ideology began? Was it even present during the monarchy? No, so they're white Russian, right? So actually, Stalin was Georgian, right? But you wouldn't know that because, well, he represented the Russian state, Khrushchev was Ukrainian. Mikita Khrushchev. Gorbachev, I don't know what their ethnic background really is, but the thing is that they were promoting this ideal of the Russian peoples being the greatest peoples in the world. The reason why Moscow was the center is because Moscow and St. Petersburg were the centers of the Russian Empire. And to be fair, those were the only cities where infrastructure already existed. So that's kind of how they became the center of the events. And all of the money was poured into Moscow, and all of the money for development was poured into Moscow too. Actually, Beria, I don't know, but I don't believe that Beria is Russian Rumpy. Let me see. Забанили ні за що в TikTok, комплімент тобі зробив, що гарно виглядаєш, називається. Hey guys, can you please unban device Maxim? I don't know why you banned him and who did, but he's a regular in lives. He's Ukrainian and he's very sweet, and it's okay. I mean, I know that he's been here every day. Thank you, Netlin. Can we please not ban him? 1 second. I will show you. I will tell you where Beria is from. Lavrenti Beria was born in Abkhazia, Georgia. Beria was born in Abkhazia, Georgia. And of course, Beria was Georgian too, which is actually very interesting because, Stalin had a policy of Georgianization of Abkhazia and Georgianization of Ossetia, and Abkhazia and Ossetia have their own languages. And I think that he was taking out his frustration on the fact that he wasn't, this big ruler, and Georgia wasn't the great, Tsardom, but it was just a republic within Soviet Union where Russia was the center, the sun around which everything revolved. He introduced a policy of Georgianization of all of the nations within and around Georgia that he could. That was his kind of that was his answer to Russification, but to do it in his homeland. But the reason why they were like ethnocentric to Russians is because, well, the Russian Empire, those were the Russian emperors, those were that was when the Russian Empire was great. Here's the thing, you know, nobody in the Russian Empire actually wanted the empire to fall. They didn't like the Romanovs. It's not that they didn't like the empire and that they were tired of the imperial lifestyle or they didn't like the image they had in the world. They just didn't like Romanovs. Romanovs made one of the most gravely mistakes, and they associated themselves with this kind of like charlatan Rasputin. And he was, you know, Dugin now is being called Putin's Rasputin because he's like a spiritual advisor. He's Putin's spiritual advisor, and he's the one who preaches like Pax Russica, otherwise known as like the Russian world. And he is said to be the initiator of the war in Ukraine, and he's said to be the initiator of this whole like Russian world ideology and that it needs to spread and this whole imperialism mindset, right? And he's like a charlatan too. He's being called a philosopher, but he's not a philosopher. He's just a random man who is a Nazi, pretty much. And he does not have credentials of philosopher. He's not a scientist. He does not have any degrees to sort of qualify him as such. He's not even like aware of any philosophical kind of pathways. He's only called a philosopher because his philosophy is the Russian world, but that's not a philosophy. That is a handbook for genocide and Nazism. So that is just a preacher, a cult preacher. So he is being famed as Putin's Rasputin because he's another spiritual advisor who's very, very, controversial figure to say the least. And so was Rasputin. One of the reasons why Romanovs lost their credibility was because of their love to Rasputin, and because they trusted Rasputin, and because the Russian people didn't. And the Russian people were always the ethnic center of the Russian Empire. So, you know, when it became the Soviet Union, still the same thing, still Russian-centric. And it didn't matter if you were a ruler who was of Georgian ancestry, or if you were a ruler who was of Armenian ancestry or of Ukrainian ancestry. You know, you were brought up by the Communist Party. You were brought up by Lenin. You were brought up by the Bolsheviks. You were brought up to think you were Russian. You were brought up to think that if you did not identify as Russian, you were not worth it. And so that's why these people didn't only they wanted to be seen as Russian. Stalin wanted to be seen as Russian. Beria wanted to be seen as Russian. It's not like they decided to be ethnocentric to Russians because they were Russian or they had something to do with Russia. No, not really. It's just that they lived in this world where being Russian was what you wanted to be. And so for them, being the rulers of Russia, that was the peak of it. And they were not only seen as Russian, they were at the top. So that's kind of how. Here in the US, we're beginning to experiment with socialist politics, which I feel is good. However, I'm seeing a lot of people idealizing Lenin instead of Marx and Engels. I'm starting to get the feeling that this is a fatal flaw listening to this analysis. Yeah, it is a fatal flaw. Well, there are a lot of commies that are emerging in the United States right now who love Stalin, who love Lenin. A lot of people who love Lenin and who love communism. And the funny thing is that these people have never lived under communism. It's it's like when you hire somebody who has learned how to do things and they know how to do them in theory, but when you put them to apply it in practice, you see that they lack experience, right? And they don't know what they're doing. So it's the same with all of these newly emerging commies. It's I understand that it sounds to you like the doctrine of the Soviet Union. No, Grumpy, he's already unblocked. His username is the same as his username on on here. And he was unblocked. Anyways, but yeah, the people who idealize communism have never lived under communism. Communism is supposed to be like the doctrine of communism and the doctrine of the Soviet Union makes it sound like it was supposed to be the dream world where everybody has everything equal. But the thing is, that's in theory. But in practice, what ends up happening is that the ruling class has everything and the rest of the people equally have nothing. So yeah, it seems like everyone's equal, but everyone equally does not have anything. Everyone equally has to stand in bread lines. Everyone equally has the same amount of furniture in their apartment. Everyone equally will never have a microwave. Everyone equally will never have a car. Everyone equally will never have anything of like modern technology. Everyone equally will never be able to go on vacations, you know? So it's like, it is equal. It's just that everybody equally as much is poor and everybody equally as much does not have enough means. But it doesn't feel nearly as bad because no one has enough means. Yeah, equal misery is right. But so that's kind of what it is. Stalin was a Democrat and future planner. For example, Holodomor was a project, but I see. Our favorite troll is back. Thank you, Jilly. Thank you, Jilly. Okay, well, does anyone have any questions? Because at this point, it's been an hour and a half, and I was planning to fit all of my information into an hour of the stream tonight. But I am very happy that we did an hour and a half, and I think that a lot of you have commented some very interesting things that I was very happy to read, because anytime people know, yeah, John, don't even ask. Anytime people know things about the Russian Empire and about the Soviet Union, it makes me happy, because, you know, not everybody was put into the veil of ignorance and the veil of the bliss of the unknown, you know? Yes, I did get my watermelon bumpy. Thank you, Danon. Thank you, thank you. Well, I guess with that said, I'm gonna say, if you would like more updates on everything that's been happening. О, Василь, можна? Ти можеш поставити це все в холодильник, щоб воно не зіпсувалося? Дякую. Was Peter first influenced by the Roman Empire or other past empires? So we don't really know. So here's the thing. We don't really know what was going on through Peter's head, right? Peter was a power-hungry man who was a king of a small tsardom and wanted to be a king of a big empire. And the only way that he could reach being an empire was to steal. And the thing is that the Roman Empire still kind of grew, right? The Roman Empire took territories. The Roman Empire, although evil, still established sort of on their own, right? However, Peter over here did not want to go through all that effort. He just wanted to pretend like he already was established, and he already was Kiev Rus, and he already was like the descendant, the direct ancestor of the strong country. In your opinion, is there any truly neutral nation that could serve as a moderator in diplomatic negotiations to stop the war? No, but also here's the thing. there are no diplomatic negotiations to stop the war, because the only stop to the war would be, like, here's the thing, the only stop to the war would be Russia withdrawing their troops and from all of Ukraine, and Russia paying reparations, and Russia agreeing to all of our conditions, and they never will. And so there is no diplomatic way of solving this without solving it on the battlefield. And so there isn't really like a neutral nation that could be a mediator, right? Because there is nothing to mediate, because none of the Russian conditions should ever be accepted, and Russia should be taught a lesson. And that's the whole point, where, like, at this point, Russian negotiations mean that Russia is going to be given compromises and stay in some sort of power and respectability, right? And that just simply shouldn't happen, because we're going to end up with just another empire, and we're going to fail one more time to stop it from spreading, right? Because we're just going to give it a break. We might punish it for a little bit, and then it's just going to stay dormant until it does what it always does. And the people are going to feel like they were scorned, because they're not going to feel like the whole world turned away from them because they actually did something wrong. They're just going to feel like they were punished for no reason, right? And they're going to live with that for generations on. But yeah, so negotiations would mean we leave Russia a chunk of land. And you have seen what Russia does with people on those lands. My mom and dad are good. Thank you, Peter. Okay, well, I'm going to show you a Cine site, because Cine is hilarious. Hello. Hello, little gremlin. Hello, Bunchkin. Hello. Hello, Bunchkin. What are you doing, little gremlin? How are you feeling? How are you feeling, gremlin? So, CineCam. And, pulling troops out of Ukraine. It's now too late to peace. All the war crimes need to be addressed, or they simply will try again. Yeah, exactly. All right. I shall go. I will see you guys tomorrow, I think noon, for the news, or at 12:30. Because I looked at, you know what's funny? I started looking into insights, like the analytics on YouTube, and it looks like up until noon, no one's on here from my audience. So I would say 12:30, because it looks like 12 is when, like noon to 6 is when most activity happens among you guys. So, so I will be here at 12:30 for the news. And also, listen, troll, there is a troll on YouTube. The problem is, I don't mind criticism. I mind you, because it's your 160 something account, and that is at this point just sick. Like, dude, I understand that you're not going to leave me alone. I don't care. I don't care. You're going to be blocked every single time, no matter how hard you try. Good night, guys. And Diane, this sweater is from a Ukrainian brand. It's tagged actually on my Instagram. So if you'd like to see more information while you are not while I'm not streaming, I do have a Twitter. Twitter is the same as Twitch, so you can follow me there, and I do repost a lot of stuff there and do share a lot of my thoughts on what's happening with the current invasion. And if you would like to support my activity in bringing you news and support my reporting, I do have a Patreon. The lowest tier is $10. It go a long way and is much appreciated, although obviously not required or mandatory, or no pressure. But if you do want to check it out, it's Spy News Network INTL, available in my About the Channel link in About the Channel, or If you're on TikTok or Twitter, it's in my link in bio. And on Twitch, I believe it's also in my about. Or you can manually search it up. It's Spy News Network INTL. Thank you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. And thank you for everybody new who just subscribed. I will see you tomorrow for the news in Ukraine. I do them daily. I am in the United States, and I have been here for 11 years, but my family lives in Lviv, Ukraine, and always has, and I was born and raised in Lviv, Ukraine as well. And I moved there I moved from there at the age of 16 or 17. So yeah, and yeah, that's what it is. Alrighty, thank you very, very much. I adore you guys. Thank you for everybody who subscribed. Nice to meet you, and I hope to see you tomorrow during the news session.